Well, welcome to the Christ-centered cosmic civilization. We're deep into language, words, stories territory. Really, it's stories now more than just words in and of themselves. And we thought about poetry when we talked to Glenn. I'm still in Eastbourne, and I'm at the Speak Life studio here, but I'm actually joined now by the mighty Nate Morgan Locke, who is, as we all will know, he is the Reformed Mythologist. Welcome, and tell us, what is the Reformed Mythologist? What is this identity that you have?
Well, basically, I just took two words that terrify two different groups of people. So there's a people who are nervous about the word Reformed because it sounds like the nasty version of Christianity, because it's all about, the exclusivity of Christ through his death on the cross, and it's all about the Bible being the only word of God, and so it's that, and then mythologist, which terrifies all the people who are comfortable with Reformed, because they're like, "What do you mean what do you mean mythology? That sounds ridiculous." But really, the last four letters of the title of the thing that's doing it. So gist, mythologist. So I'm a gist guy. I'm not very good with detail. So just give me the gist on something. I can give you the gist of something. So when I use Reformed, what I basically mean is like the five solas. Right. That's kind of where I'm trying to like Reformation. Yeah, the Reformation, and thinking about like what was it they were getting back to as they reformed their theology back on the scriptures, and so solus Christus and sola fide, etc. And then the mythologist. Well, that is trying to think. Well, there's mythos and logos. And put those two together and get mythology. And mythos, it's like when we use the word myth, we tend to now mean a particular kind of story, probably one that isn't true. It's like it's used newspaper headlines. This is just a myth. It's not really happened. Whereas actually mythos just means story. It means kind of an account of something. And so I like studying story from a Christian point of view. And so thinking about the origin of stories, why do we have them? How can you give an account for a story? What even is a story? What stories are in the culture? How do you analyze them and study them? And how do you tell stories? And what are the skills you need in different media to tell stories? And trying to do all of that with my starting point being that we live inside, as you've wonderfully said, the Christ-centered cosmic civilization. Wow. As that story is being kind of lived out, played out in the universe.
And if people want to see and listen to you and interact with or support you, what would be the best way to go about doing that?
So Reformed Mythologist on YouTube, that's the channel where I put lots of stuff out. Obviously, you've been on there a couple of times. And we've been delighted to be able to make a couple of little video edits of some segments of sessions you've done for us at Speak Life. So they're on there. And there's me talking about, cartoons and films and all sorts of different things.
I do. If people haven't watched these things, they're brilliant, where you'll take things in popular culture, movies, ideas, and we'll get people will understand better what you do and how to think in this way. Hopefully, in a little while, if they haven't done that already. But you gotta check out what Nate does. I say, because it's critical for engaging with the culture generally. But I think it's just fundamentally it's a different way of thinking than, I think, the disastrous way that's happened for about 300 years. So let me set things up a little bit, and then where I am with things. So how do we tell truth, or rather, what is the truth? So Pilate's question, it's profound. He's like, what is truth? And he may be asking in a cynical way. He's like, maybe he's almost like a postmodernist at the time, whatever. He's like, who can tell? He's a cynical, worn-out Roman governor. He's heard it all before. But there are like many strategies for searching for and expressing truth. So one example is sort of what people think of as truth. Sometimes people will say to me, I can't believe in all this Jesus rubbish. I want mathematical truth, they'll say. So I want things like 1 + 1 = 2 truth. And I think René Descartes thought like that. And he was like, that's the gold standard of truth, mathematics. But I'm going to say, is that true at all? Is 1 + 1 = 2 true at all? Is it? And I'm going to say, I don't know whether it's true. It's correct. 1 + 1 = 2 is correct. And you get a tick for that. You have correctly done this thing. But is it true? Like, I don't think so. I think the correct way to say that's correct. And in a similar way, if we say describe, and this is expanding the strategy of, say, the past 300 years, to say we want to know what truth is. So what we'll do is we'll like attempt to describe in a kind of mechanistic or functional way the world. So it's like, if I describe the chemical composition of a rock or the structure of a tree, is that true? Or is it better to say, no, that's correct. That's a correct thing. But is it true? I'm going to say again, no, that ain't true. It's a correct description in the way that 1 + 1 = 2 is correct. But I don't think it's true. If we're able to describe the way, say, the stars and the planets move. And that's been a kind of obsession. Just this last week, I was at Isaac Newton's pad. Is it called Wimpole House or something? It's off the A1M. It was interesting because the National Trust ran it. They kind of a little bit acknowledged his Christian faith, but not much. And I'm like, the guy was like crazy theological and stuff. And he, I think, is more of a mythologist than anything else. That's my view of Isaac Newton. I mean, and they hinted that he was making a philosopher's stone very, very subtly. But of course, he was totally making a philosopher's stone. That's like that's the whole reason for mucking about with the stars and planets. Anyway, I won't get distracted on that. But although we might do. But to describe the way the stars and the planets move, is that, again, truth? Or is it, again, just correct? That's correct expression of movement. But have we yet got to truth? I'm going to say, no, we're not yet anywhere close to truth. But if we know what, say, like Genesis 1 says, now then, the stars, the sun, moon, and the stars, they are there to tell us signs and sacred seasons. Now, Isaac Newton, I know, would say, until we can talk about that, until we know the signs and the sacred seasons, we have not yet got to truth. Like, the truth of the sun, moon, and stars is the signs and sacred seasons thing. That's the truth they have. Otherwise, I'm just mucking about with correct things. So, again, think about how Jesus and the prophets speak about the world and humanity. Sometimes apologists seem to think it's amazing if the prophets and apostles get something correct, and they'll go, this is why you should become a Christian, because the Bible seems to know that the earth is a sphere, or that there's like Jeremiah seems to get that there's a hydrologic cycle of water, turning to clouds, raining, coming back, going round a cycle. There you go. That's true. Whereas I think, that's good. It's good that they have some correct, what we might say correct. And maybe that's important, that they get things correct in describing the world. Maybe that I think it is important that they're correct. But I don't think that is truth. Rather, it's what their intention is not to give us correct descriptions of weather formations. And I'm like, it's good. I think it is important that they're correct about things like that. But that isn't the truth that they're after. They're after truth. They want to tell us truth. So what are the sun, moon, stars, and weather, plants, animals, and events? What are they saying? What are they for? What are they for? What's the truth about them? And the truth about them is not to simply describe, like, this is what they're made of. This is the predictable movements or something. It's like, well, that's correct, but that doesn't... what's the truth about them? What is the story? I'm going to use the big S word.
there we go.
I know I'm going to use
Drop
the big
it
S word. What's the story that they're part of? That is truth. Rather merely a correct description of what's there. So, all right, let's leave it at that, because we could come on to how that might apply even to the living God. But what is it? How would you react to what I've just dumped a load of silly things?
I love
maybe.
it, and I think it reminded me of a few things. One is I always end up going back to C.S. Lewis, and that's because I grew up in Narnia, like.
What?
Literally, that's my parents' house is called Narnia. So
what, really?
Yeah, that's what.
Oh
so
my goodness,
I grew up in Narnia.
You grew up on the other side of the wardrobe. Yeah,
that's it. And the thing about that is that often I'll be thinking a thought, or I'll discover something. I'll be like, "Oh, this is amazing! This is brand new," and then I'll find something in Lewis, and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, he's already
there."
But what were you saying about this? Concern for just a kind of mechanistic, reducing it down to smaller bits, kind of label, smaller parts, kind of approach. So in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, when Edmund and Eustace and Lucy meet Ramandu, and he says he's a star, and then Eustace says, "Oh, in our world, a star is just a ball of gas," and then Ramandu's like, "Oh no, that's just what a star's made of. That's not what a star is." Like, don't be ridiculous. So that good. Kind of approach, and then that's also there's a very similar conversation in The Lion King when Timon and Pumbaa and Simba are lying down and they're looking up at the stars, and then Timon's like, "Oh, they're just fireflies just trapped in that big old net up there," and you're like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then Pumbaa says, "I think they're balls of gas burning billions of miles away," and then he said, like, "Pumbaa, to you everything is gas."
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like, so but what you're supposed to do is to go, "Oh yeah, Pumbaa's actually right, but he's a bit thick." And then Simba says, "Oh, I think they're the kings of the past looking down on us." And they all just start laughing. And obviously within that story, that is what they are. That is Mufasa is going to be able to speak to Simba through that. And certainly within Narnia, that is Ramandu is one of the stars. And then we want to go, "Oh, but that's only in the imaginary worlds. That's only if you go into, the Pride lands of Lion King, or it's only if you go into that far out in the kind of, is it the Eastern Isles that they end up going to?" Yeah. Whereas in this world, stars, they are just burning balls of gas. Like that's just what they are, and that's the truth about them. Whereas you're saying, and I think rightly, that's a correct thing to say about the physical makeup of matter in motion and all that sort of stuff. But as to that being any use,
that's not the
or
truth.
Even being interesting, because I find it just boring. It's just like, oh, that's what that is. That's just a smaller labeling of parts, and I'm like, well, that's dull. It's like,
that's the worst sin of all.
Just don't be tedious. It's like, actually, that there's a story and that they are communicating something, and as you say, the seasons are communicating to us. And so the question then is, what is the story? And who are the main characters and what do they do? And that is a far more human engagement with the world that we've been made and put into than just this kind of incredibly dull labeling of smaller and smaller bits until you get to basically nothing, right?
There's nothing there. The further you dig down, the less there's less there. We could think about that, like the concept of trying to get to the essence of things, and that's like a kind of obsession. We'll say, to know the truth about it, we've got to dig down to the essence, and we think we can do that. And you're like, no, can we even do that? Like there's a glass there, and you go, oh yeah, well that's what it's made of, glass. Oh well, what's glass? Oh well, this is the composition of glass. okay, but then atoms, and then,
Yeah.
okay, but what is an atom? And it's like mostly just empty space.
Yeah, yeah.
And they go, oh, well, yeah, but it's the subatomic particles. Okay, so those subatomic, what about them? And then okay, so what's under there? And then, because the concept of atom, like something that can't be divided. Now we go, no, of course there's levels below that.
Yeah.
Subatomic. And they go, oh, subatomic. But then you start to get into things where like, well, it's more like fields of force or vibrations or cosmic strings and things. And suddenly there is no bottom. You don't arrive at something like, now we have got to the absolute bottom. And then, they always, all my life, it's we're just about to get to the grand theory of everything. We're just about to put our feet on the absolute solid ground at the very bottom. And it turns out, as we go down, there's less and less to stand on, and then we're at it. There's just some kind of energies, vibrations.
Yeah.
And you think, well, we can't even know what that glass really is.
Yeah. And you found yourself in that hole where reality, because you've defined it in this horribly pathetic way, reality is now empty. You found yourself in a hole and you're basically just shouting up, oh, we'll just keep digging. Like we are going to keep.
We're nearly at the bottom.
We will. The next spadeful is going to really show us
hit bedrock.
What reality is.
Yeah,
and it's like no, because you're asking the wrong questions about what reality is going to be.
And it's a bit like in the Bible where they talk about the bottomless abyss, and it's as if sin and unbelief and alienation from God is this bottomless abyss. And the reason that's so terrifying is once you sink into it, you do believe you're going to get to the bottom of it. And no, I'm going to make sense of this sinful life that I've got. Yeah. I'm going to think my way into understanding it. And then I'll find myself on stuff. It's like in Minecraft or something where you go down and then there is a kind of absolute base to it. Yeah. Thank you. But then there's a belief, if I do, I will get to that. And that you never do. The Bible's like, there is nothing. Once you approach life and you're digging into something that in the wrong way like that, you just keep going into infinity.
And what's that bit in Proverbs about though? Was it 3 things that never say enough, 4th are never satisfied?
That's right.
And the ground, the grave is like never satisfied. I remember you talked to me about that. Well, that was years ago, back at the All Souls Clubhouse, and you were sort of did this thing of the grave is just consuming more and more. Give me more. I'm never full. And that sense that there is a kind of pointlessness to it. And then when people recognize that as pointless, when they lose hope in the project,
the project
of the Enlightenment or of modernism, is you just get into this postmodern, completely absurdist,
because that's the only thing left to
crisis.
Do. Okay, so there is no bottom. Therefore, because our strategy was correct.
This was the only.
What we've got to is there is no bottom to anything. There is no foundation. It's all illusion. Nothing holds together. Therefore, life is meaningless, and therefore I'll just invent whatever I want.
And then, so now. It was Sisyphean. The task was Sisyphean. You were just pushing this rock up a hill, and it's going to fall down every single time. So what are you going to do? And then Sartre just goes, "Oh no, Sisyphus is going to find joy in the pointlessness of life. He's just going to be the absurd hero and just kind of imagine Sisyphus is happy
doing it
in his completely pointless, endless task." And you think, or not. Do you know what I mean? Why imagine him happy?
Yeah, why imagine
just if we're going to be nihilistic, you can smile about it. You can be, but you don't have to.
I don't think people can, though. And there's just amazing levels of. Well, it was like Jürgen Moltmann said. When you look at the modern world, there's a massive sickness. A massive sickness that manifests itself in all kinds of social problems, environmental problems, but just people cannot be human in this environment because it's this a project of saying the truth is what we want to do is the truth is trying to describe what the world is. What the world is. And then, sort of dismantling it into almost like static parts and forces and concepts, and then wondering why this doesn't make sense of things, and why we feel alienated and darkened and despair and the all that. And I think it might be because of this concept of truth. And like, I know you and I have thought a little bit, because when I was talking about this guy Gotthold Lessing from the 18th century.
Oh,
and
yes.
I know. He felt this. I did send you something, and it's like, you probably deleted it or something. But
no, he wrote Nathan the Wise. I mean, I've not read what he wrote, but he wrote a play, and he wrote all sorts of plays.
Yeah, but he did write Nathan the Wise, and obviously a winner. Obviously,
like, well, where is wisdom? If not in Nathan?
Nathan's got it. Yeah. But he is at the beginning of this Enlightenment project, and he gets this problem, and he is saying, okay, I get that there are like historical scientific facts. They're just true. And anybody can discover that sort of truth anywhere in the world, because they're like just true, like the mathematics things.
Yeah.
Mathematics, that's true. Rational, philosophical truths, or the laws of physics and things like that, that's just true, and anybody anywhere can access them. But he says, like, when I come at the Bible, when I'm coming up against Jesus, that's not what's being offered to me. What's being offered to me is a happening. Something has happened in history that claims to be universal truth, but it happened at a particular time and place, and that's supposed to be universally true. I can't, like, and he's like, he called it a broad, ugly ditch. He said, I'm on the side of like scientific, mathematical truth, and I have that's the only truth I can believe in. And then there's this like ditch that can't be crossed, and on the other side is like Jesus and the apostles and things, and they're like, no, something's happened that is not discoverable by like abstract, timeless philosophy. You have to know this story and historical happenings, and those things are the actual truth of the universe. And he's like, I can't get to that.
But I love the fact that so the ditch. I love, like, he's got this idea of the ditch, and you think, okay, so is the ditch true? And he probably just, in his German accent, I won't try and do one, but he'd be like, oh, it's not really true. It's just a metaphor I'm just using. You're like, interesting that you want to use a metaphor to try to get at this truth that you're trying to communicate.
I've never thought of that
because
before.
The ditch. Do you mean an actual ditch? No, I don't mean an actual ditch. Well, why do you use the word ditch then? It's like, well, because at the moment, that's all I'm trying to explain something that's very complicated. So I'm reaching for images and pictures and things to communicate that. And so I've got this kind of spatial metaphor to try to help me understand, the fact that there are these real truths over here on this side. And then there's this kind of Jesus-y story events and, first century in the Middle East happenings. And I'm here and I'm just, this is terrible because you can't have both. And so we're doing some study on cognitive metaphor theory. Have you heard of this?
No,
cognitive
go on, that sounds
theory.
good.
So there's a couple of guys from the 80s who wrote a book called Metaphors We Live By. So their argument was that the human brain has to use metaphors all the time to help it kind of understand what the world is. So like life is a journey,
right?
Or argument is war, or just those two are probably enough. But so life is a journey. So we're going to borrow from this like story thing journey. And then we're going to try and understand this abstract thing called life through this metaphor. Same with argument is war. And that's going to be like manifested in everyday human speech as we use idioms and language to communicate about ourselves. We're going to use these metaphors. And their point was, okay, so it just so happens that the human brain happens to be like this. It's like it's just a bit of an accident.
Yeah.
It's just helpful. And we can't really get to the proper essence of stuff. But for the time being, we'll just live in these little metaphors.
So it's a provisional measure.
So it's kind of provisional, and it's kind of it's a fortunate, as you say, little happenstance. But the idea that we might be mythopathic, to use a C.S. Lewis word, that we might have been created with story categories and in a story response, so that we respond to story and storytelling, and that might be an intentional part of what it means to be human, rather than just an accident of our evolutionary
or
development,
cultural
or whatever.
Development, or whatever.
Social
or a strategy to deal with the fact that there is no meaning. We go provisionally. Let's pretend there's meaning.
So that idea that we are going to reach for metaphor and story to understand the world around us, and when you're looking at a lot of explanations for why the stories exist, like you say, loads of the evolutionary biologists and those kind of guys, they're just like, this is just our coping mechanism, and it's what separates us from the animals, but it's all an accident, social construct. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not tied to any
survival strategy
reality.
That's it.
It's not grounded anywhere. Whereas in the Christ-centered cosmic civilization, we're saying, no, this is reality, and therefore this is how we are and how we behave and how we think, because it is properly true that we live in the Christ-centered cosmic civilization, not just that it kind of functionally works for us. So the fact that Lessing goes for a metaphor, the ditch, to try to understand what is happening between his facts and his values, or whatever it is itself instructive that he is made in the image of God in a weird way.
He's trying to communicate a story, and he's imagining this story, and there's a ditch, and he's sort of imagining, imagine a story in which I got to the other side of the ditch or something, exactly. And that would be a great story, wouldn't it? And we're like, it is a great story, and he's like, whoa. And this is the most memorable thing he says, and it's this thing that's and it's of a different kind. It is like a truth thing, and I'm like, now that's truth, kind of you're getting for. Whereas some of the what he thought was truth, I'm like, no, you kind of I know this is a metaphor that you and I have used before in the past, but this idea of a theatre, and it's as if that he's saying, I'm going to describe all the items on the stage and the structure, the composition. That's the truth. It's like, no, it isn't truth. That's just the correct layout of the stage. The truth is the play that is performed on that stage. That's the truth. And is that
just let it play out?
Let the play happen. Just listen to it. Just shut up.
Now's the time for There's another great bit, and again, to go back to Lewis in the other end of Narnia with the magician's nephew. The bit when Narnia is being sung into being. And there's a brilliant bit where Uncle Andrew, I might have talked to you about, I'm sure.
No, do it though. Even if you have.
Uncle Andrew is, so he's like the worst kind of magician, because he's like trying to harness magic for his own power all the way through the book.
And he's a rationalist scientist as well, isn't he? He's brilliant for that.
And so whilst the Narnia is kind of forming as Aslan sings and walks back and forth, as all this stuff is happening, he's just jabbering away like, oh, come on, what's going on there? And then the cabbie, the cabbie accidentally ends up accidentally he ends up in there with his horse Strawberry and everything. So he says, I love this line, he says, it's a weird phrase as well, but he says, stow it, governor, which just means sharp, right?
Sharp.
He says, watching and listening's the thing at present. It's like, this isn't the time for you to be just